Hey everybody, welcome to VTX Podcast, episode 1. I'm really happy to have you, and I'm really excited for my first guest, Jacob WEBB. I'm excited for a lot of reasons. You know, Jacob WEBB was one of my first friends at Paterson University, and he's a phenomenal musician, great person, and he's just got a wealth of knowledge to share. So I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. Currently, Jacob has a #1 hit single on Billboard called Details that's been on the contemporary jazz chart for 4 weeks in a row. And at the time when we recorded this episode back in late 2019, he was talking about an artist that he was currently working with and developing, Alex Parchment, who wasn't quite yet on Billboard and now has seen some Billboard success. So he shares a lot of great information about how he got involved in contemporary jazz, how he got involved with artist development. You know, we talk a little bit about the history, and he gives a lot of good information about how to approach creating music in a way that's both commercially viable, yet also creatively satisfying. So I really hope you enjoy this episode and get a lot out of it. Without further ado, here's Jacob WEBB. Welcome, everybody. Got a very good friend of mine on the show today. Amazingly talented bassist, keyboard player, recording artist, producer, songwriter, arranger, name it. Jacob WEBB, welcome.
What's up, guys? What's up? Hey.
Yeah, dude.
Good to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. You know, I've been talking to you about this for months, and since the jump, you're like, whenever you're ready, let's go. And here we are.
Yeah, man. I'm so excited to be here. This is like, to me, I understand how important this whole podcast series is for you. And, it's just a pleasure to be here, bro. Pleasure to be here, man.
Thank you so much. I have so much we can talk about already.
All right.
But, let's jump right in. JT Project.
Yeah.
You and your partner, Todd Shefflin.
Yes.
Multiple Billboard hits.
Yeah.
2 at #1.
Yeah, we got a couple #1s.
Yeah, man. Congrats on your success. And I feel like for you, man, you guys are young. This is like the beginning.
Oh, man.
You got your whole life ahead of you, and you guys are just crushing it.
Yeah, man. I mean, the JT Project is like the baby here. We started this thing at Paterson University. And man, when was that? It was like 2009, 2010 is when the group was formed. And we've been working that whole concept. It started out as sort of a fusion kind of thing. It turned into like straight ahead, and then we ended up finding the contemporary jazz market, which really put us on the map. Within the last 5 years, we ended up getting all of these different Billboard chartings and the 2 #1s and all that other stuff. But I mean, it was like a continuous growth pattern for us to find our identity and what we wanted to do. And and eventually, we are where we are today.
That seems like a very organic process, how you guys like developed over time. Like, what was like, how did that happen? And what were like some of the challenges you faced along the way? And how did you guys come to some of the realizations on how you wanted to go?
Well, just from the very start of our relationship, it was like one of those first days at college kind of things where I remember hearing this sound in the practice rooms of Shea at Paterson. It was just this beautiful sound of the saxophone. And one of the first people that I met on campus, his name was Moses Howard. I was chilling with him, and I was like, "Yo, man, I hear this sound, man. Who is that?" And Moses ended up saying, "No, man, I'm gonna take you to this guy. His name is Todd Shefflin." And I opened up the door, and there he was, man. He's this amazing saxophonist, and we've been playing together for. Gosh, I mean, it's over. I mean, when I went to Paterson, it was 2007, and so I guess about 12 years now we've been making it work. So
I remember, man, and we were the same year at Willie P.
Yeah,
and I remember hearing Todd practice in the practice. I think he liked 101 or 102, one of those rooms that he was always over there. I was like, man, he was just like, yeah, ripping through all types of patterns, just like spot on, man. He was a trip to listen to. And it was, man, that practice room scene, where it was just like everyone was so close together, and you could really hear the next room from where you were at. Mm-hmm. And it really is like this kind of cacophony of sound over there that was really inspiring, you know?
Right. I mean, William Paterson was great. The practicing, like you said, was very intense. Guys were trying to cut each other, you know, like I can't even believe that, you know, a lot of guys, I remember a lot of guys like quitting, like going either back home to where they were from. A lot of guys were from West Coast, from the South, and a lot of guys didn't make it. But William Paterson was cutthroat, and you know, but at the end of the day, it was all about growing. And you know, if you made it out, you were like a product of that environment, which was just great. You know? Man,
I didn't realize it was like that over there, because I wasn't really in the jazz program. I was sound engineering and classical. I love jazz and originally wanted to be in the jazz program. Didn't get in at first. Got in either my second or third year because a spot opened up. But I was like, am I really going to stay here 5 years at that point, or however many years I had to stay? But I do remember the divide between the classical and the jazz program. And like you know, even just wanting to maybe take a couple lessons or something with somebody they were like, nope.
Wow.
Nope. Except when I was in Chico Mendoza's Latin Jazz Ensemble the first year, because there was literally nobody to play, unfortunately. I wonder how he's doing, if he's...
you know? I'm not too sure either, but man, he was a great, if he's still there, great professor. You know, he brought that whole Latin identity to William Paterson, which is, every time I would go to the concerts, you know, it was great. He would bring in guest artists, and yeah, man, Chico, he's the man. He's the man.
Totally. Yeah, and man, it's really cool. Been watching the JT project develop over time, and you have the record label now, right?
Right. So the JT project is on the JT Project Records, and in addition to that, I formed a record company called Next Paradigm.
Okay.
Which, in 2018. I was very fortunate enough to release a solo record because I wanted to showcase more of my bass abilities. With the JT project, I was mainly showcasing the keys kind of thing, but naturally, saxophone is the go-to sound. So you know, in addition to that, I wanted to find an identity with the bass. So I released a record called Moments of Change. I'm Coming Home. And that record in itself ended up, I had 2 singles on there, and both of them made Billboard. One went at number 6 and the other, I think it was 11. But with that whole ideal of, okay, well, I got the JT project, Jacob WEBB. Man, I think I can put myself in a position to be able to develop artists and kind of show them the way of contemporary jazz, trying to, you know, have a good product, number one, and then having good business decisions, either your radio promoter or marketing or whatever you want to do behind that. So the last year and a half has been kind of like a Next Paradigm, developing artists kind of situation, which is really nice in a sense, because it's teaching me personally, not just the artistic side of creating music. Now I'm putting on more so a business hat, and it's a different experience, but it's actually kind of rewarding, you know, in a sense. Yeah.
Sure. If there's some people out there that maybe that maybe you could give some advice. They want to like maybe be a little bit more commercially successful, or like kind of get, you know, find that any kind of advice for both artistically and business wise. What do you think you would tell some people?
So whatever format you are getting yourself into, it's very important to study that format. So I'll give you a story of a mistake that I feel like we've made with the JT project in the past. We wanted radio success, but we didn't have a product that represented a good radio presence. And so we spent a couple of years, actually a couple records, on releasing music that we felt like, oh man, this is killing, man. We got a lot of notes in here, and it's really emotional, and we got 15-minute songs on here, which isn't a good idea for radio. But studying the format that you want to get in, and really understanding how it works, the mechanics of that. So when I come to a lot of artists, I have one artist in particular right now that he's doing very, very well. He's on the climb. His name is Alex Parchment, and he's on this on a track to getting on Billboard, which right now he's on this thing called the New and Active, which is like, if you have the Billboard Top 30, then there's 31, 32, 33, 34, and 35. He's at the 35th spot of Billboard right now.
And so that puts you on a separate category over there, the New and Active.
New and Active is like, you're almost on Billboard. So Alex came to me. Well, actually, I approached him, but we were mutually having conversations. He wanted to figure out how to get into the contemporary jazz world. And I told him, look, you got to study the music, number one. You have to put out a product that is, it's fitted for radio. So it sometimes as an artist, it's hard to say, oh, I'm going to do this certain way because I'm artistically the way that I am and I want to express myself that way. But sometimes you have to find that middle ground, and it's hard to do. I've been in that position to where I didn't want to give up, certain things that I felt like were important. But, if you want a commercial sound and if you want success in a commercial environment, you have to have those ingredients.
So what are some parts of that format, some of those ingredients that people should be looking out for and studying?
Okay, so in the contemporary jazz world, one thing that I love doing is, the first song, if it goes to radio, first of all, it has to be what I like to call is up-tempo with some kind of funky edge to it, but not that funky, if that makes any sense. It has to have that energy and excitement, but the overall texture of the sound has to be, conducive for radio, so it can't be too aggressive. So that's one thing. I like the tempo and the texture. Also the timing, as I mentioned before. If you can get a song under 4 minutes, you're in good shape. And then one of the most important things is that melody, that hook. You got to have a melody that sticks. Like once you play that song and that 3 minutes and 59 seconds is up and a radio programmer is going to the next song, if I'm adding material to my station, that hook's better. It needs to catch that listener's ear because there's a lot of music and a lot of content that's being played right now. And if you want yours to be at that top level, you have to say something that is relatable and it makes sense. So I focus strongly on the melody,
So hooking them through the melody. And how soon into the song do you try to introduce that? And is there sometimes more than one hook, per song?
So I like, 4 to 8 bar intros. Usually I just go with 4 bars and then we're in the hook right there. So literally within 10 to 12 seconds of the song, you're introduced to that hook and that main melody. And then throughout the composition, you might have a what they call, a verse section and some improvisation in between. But that main reoccurring theme, is that hook. Very, very important. Very important, man.
Yeah, I can sense like how you mentioned earlier, it might be easy to maybe feel like limited if you are trying to stick to a format and try to work on these sort of ingredients. How do you balance still feeling creative yet dealing with some limitations in that and that sort of aspect?
So you always have the radio songs, and then you have the full album situation where you can express yourself any way you like. That's the approach that I take with my artists. I don't want them to feel bound down to the structure for a full project, because at the end of the day, that wouldn't be their true self, identity or whatever. So, when you come up with a production of a full album, you really want 2 or 3 songs dedicated for radio in the format that I described. And then the rest of the album, you can shape it, have your theme, whatever, your artistic abilities, expressing your artistic abilities are. So I kind of approach it like that. But Next Paradigm, man, we're all about making sure we deliver, So if we're going to radio, we're going to radio. If you want a product that is going to do well on radio, we're going to get the job done, and that's either you come to the table or it's not your thing.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of where we are, over at Next Paradigm.
That's awesome. And so you have singles and then you have an album.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people now are maybe focusing on putting out singles more. Yeah. When does it make sense to focus more on doing singles, and when does it make sense to focus more on doing an album project or an EP?
Great question. So when I'm developing an artist such as Alex Parchment, my whole business plan is, okay, well, we're going to rock singles until one of the singles gets some real traction, because I want an album impact. I don't want to release an album without a strong radio presence from a single. It just wouldn't make any financial sense when you're dealing with sales and all this. I want the listener to be engaged, and they, I want them to be like, okay, we got this awesome single on the radio. It's at such and such on Billboard. Okay, man, I'm feeling this record. It's not here yet, but you better believe it'll come soon because of that. So usually, I would suggest releasing the full project after a successful radio campaign. And for me, that's some kind of Billboard accomplishment.
That makes a lot of sense, because it's so easy with the amount of music that's being put out these days for a record. You spend so much time on a record and you put it out, and then what happens to it if there's no momentum or steam behind it?
Right. That's the whole objective. And then for the album, you don't just release an album. You hire a publicist. You do all the right things. Because another mistake that I've made in the past is just releasing a record, and you spend all this money. I remember going to this studio in New York City. It's out of business now. It used to be called Skyline.
Okay.
Man, we spent like $20,000 on that record.
Ooh.
No joke. And for not being on a label or anything, and being like 2 or 3 years out of college.
Sure.
And we're like, yeah, this is killing, man. The whole, we're in the city, we're Skyline.
Feeling that energy.
Yeah. And, the bills added up, and we ran out of money, and that was that. We're like, oh, let's just release it, That was a mistake, We should have either waited a little while before we released it and had some kind of backing behind it, you know, because that is just as important, if not more important, you know, that support, you know, that just that extra support that you need, because the record itself needs somebody to push it, you know, and people to say, hey, this is here, you know, buy it, download it, check it out, whatever. So
JT Project, you guys had a little stint with Trippin and Rhythm. That's a part of Sony Records, right?
Yeah. That was a learning curve.
Yeah.
You know?
What was that experience like?
You know, being on a label is, you know, one of those experiences where you have to, you know, you got to bring it at a certain level. And then, you know, for certain people and certain labels, they have certain expectations of a sound. Now, fortunately, Trippin' and Rhythm, they weren't really particular about what we had to play, which was great. We felt like we could be ourselves. So, I mean, we learned a lot from that experience of being in a label and having, how many artists were on there at the time? Maybe like 8 to 12 artists. So you have to wait your turn for certain things to come out. And, you know, for the JT Project, I feel like, you know, independent is where it's at, you know, just to make a long story short, because, man, we have the freedom, we control the master, obviously the publishing, all that, you know. For the format in which we're in, for us, I'm a producer, you know, I make the music, whatever. It's, you know, I don't need to hire anybody else to do that. We're self-sufficient. So independent is just a smart move for us, and we can fund it like a label, you know, on our own. So it was cool. They had some perks, like we, you know, on our first album with Trippin' and Rhythm, we were on the iTunes banner when our album was released. So, you know, you go on iTunes and you click on jazz, and all of a sudden you see the JT Project, you know, buy the album. So, you know, they had some really good connections with iTunes, and obviously their distribution was cool. But
yeah, that's a nice perk.
Yeah.
So when your experience with them, was there some things that you learned that you're now applying to your independent label?
Yeah. Well, I've learned some things that, you know, I don't want to sound harsh, but I learned some things that I would not do to other artists. And that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing, in a sense. To make a long story short, and again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with Trippin' and Rhythm, but you know, when it comes to artists, I feel like I could do a better job of bringing something to an artist and trying to get them to a high level.
That's great. That's great.
And to take care of them in the way that they deserve to be taken care of, you know, with the kind of deals that you sign.
So there's a lot of artists in the area that maybe, you know, signing to a record label or Billboard or anything, it's not even on their mind yet. They're kind of just getting started. They're trying to be creative. They're trying to find themselves. Maybe they're spending a little bit of money to produce a record, or maybe they're doing it themselves.
Yeah.
Just on that basic level of someone that's kind of just getting started off, what's some advice you could give somebody in terms of, you know, how to think about budgeting and maybe investing in their business, some sort of practices, as well as, you know, how to plan for a release of their music?
Right. So, you know, like I said before, the mistakes that we've made in our past were kind of just, you know, thinking about artistically what's going on, you know, and then everything else will take care of itself kind of vibe. But yeah, I mean, if I would put a figure out there, like say you had a record and you had a $10,000 budget or whatever, I don't know. I mean, if you're starting out, you might not even have anywhere close to that. Say you had a $3,000 budget. I don't know. I would find a way. I don't know how you can do it in this time, but I would find a way to use at least half of that money for some kind of promotion. You have to do that. And then, you spend whatever you need to make your product. But man, you're really spending if you really want a successful project, you have to have that promotion behind it. So, I would tell an artist not to jump into rushing and releasing your project. I would hold off, if that needs to be the case, until you get some kind of funding for promotion on that. Set expectations. That's a big thing. Before you play a single note, you want to, figure out what your goals for this project is. Have some kind of sense of direction. Yeah, you gotta have a sense of direction. And then, just understand that you might have to go from one step to the next, because it's all a learning process. Because personally, if you look at the JT Project catalog, I had this guy. It's funny. I'm producing some music right now for actually a well-known saxophonist in contemporary jazz. And, we've had some conversations, and he was like, yeah, man, I listened to your whole catalog, the JT Project. And he was like, man, those first couple of years, it's kind of rough, man. As far as production and just overall concept, according to him. Now, personally, I kind of dug this stuff in the beginning, from artistic standpoint, but this guy was like, man, but over time, you guys are you could see the evolution, you can see the change, and the growth, production wise, and just the whole direction, the visionary standpoint. So, for an artist, I would just say, this is where you are. Do the best of your abilities. Make sure you have some kind of plan, some kind of vision with it, and then understand there's always going to be room for growth. Don't be too hard on yourself, but it's all a journey, man.
That's great advice.
Yeah, bro.
Hey, man. And I really like the one that you said just before about take your budget and just cut it in half and put half towards production and half towards promotion. Yeah. That's great. That's a great concept.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. So we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, man.
Had a lot of fun and a lot of great takeaways, man.
Yeah, man. Well,
appreciate you,
me, man. It's an honor, and wish you guys well.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Peace.
Later.